When you think of Koko B Ware, the first thing that comes to mind is probably a fluorescent jacket, a high-energy dance, and a parrot that looked like it had more in-ring credibility than half the guys on the card. Known as the Birdman, Koko was one of the most colorful and entertaining mid-carders of the 1980s and early 90s WWF era. But don't let the squawking parrot and disco moves fool you. Behind those sunglasses was a man who had more backstage heat than a tanning bed at a Florida retirement home. Koko B Ware, real name James Ware, started his career in the territorial days, bouncing between Memphis, Mid-South, Georgia, and other wrestling hotbeds before flapping his wings into the national spotlight with the WWF. He paid his dues the hard way. Busted paydays, racist locker rooms, and promoters who had all the integrity of a politician at a bachelor party. But through it all, Koko had a mouth sharper than a straight razor and a memory like an elephant. Cross him once, and he'd carry that grudge longer than a Bruno Sammartino title reign. This list isn't about cheap heat or a botched finish. It's about the real enemies, the men who made Koko's blood boil. From backstabbing tag partners and egomaniacal main eventers to racists disguised as good old boys, these 5 names were scratched deep into the Birdman's personal burn book. And while some fans may remember Koko as a harmless undercard act who never quite broke through the glass ceiling, let's not forget, he was the first guy to give The Rock a pay-per-view victory, and he once knocked Harley Race clean off his feet in a shoot confrontation. Koko might have jobbed on TV, but backstage, he was nobody's pet canary. So put on your best neon shades and prepare to dive into the bitter underbelly of Koko's wrestling life. These are the 5 wrestlers the Birdman couldn't stand in real life. Let's take flight. But this time, we're not soaring. We're swooping down for vengeance. Now, you're probably wondering, how could anyone possibly hate Bobby Eaton? The guy was beloved, respected, and frankly, wrestled better than 90% of his peers while looking like your cousin Earl from the trailer park. But that's exactly why Koko B Ware couldn't stand him. Bobby Eaton was too good, and he came from the same Memphis circuit as Koko, where friendly competition turned toxic faster than milk at a summer barbecue. During their time in Memphis, Koko and Eaton were rising stars on opposite ends of the locker room spectrum. Koko had the flash, the promos, and the crowd appeal. Eaton had the work rate, the in-ring IQ, and the uncanny ability to make a broomstick look like Ric Flair. The problem? Promoters often picked Eaton's silky smooth technical skills over Koko's explosive charisma. To quote Koko in an interview one time, "They always gave Bobby the time and gave me the birdseed." The tension escalated in 1981 when both men were vying for TV title pushes. Bill Dundee and Jerry Lawler, booking gods of the Memphis territory, favored Eaton, allegedly telling Koko he needed to learn how to wrestle like Bobby if he wanted the main event slot. Koko's response? "If I wanted to be Bobby Eaton, I'd start sleeping through my own matches." Things hit a boiling point backstage when Eaton reportedly undercut Koko's momentum by lobbying for a 6-man tag with other workhorses, excluding the Birdman. Koko took it personally and confronted Eaton, accusing him of keeping the brothers down. Eaton didn't respond because, well, he rarely talked. But in wrestling, silence is just another form of heat. While they never had a major public blow-up, their quiet feud simmered for years. Even when they both ended up in the WWF orbit, Koko as Birdman and Eaton as part of the incoming WCW crowd, the vibe was frostier than a SummerSlam in Siberia. Koko, in later interviews, admitted, "Bobby wasn't a bad man, but he sure as hell was in my way." And that, my friends, is wrestling's most awkward rivalry. One man talking too little and one man singing too loud. If you've ever seen Koko B Ware and Jim the Anvil Neidhart together on screen, you might think they got along like 2 guys at a barbecue. But off camera, it was more like a hibachi grill fire, hot, dangerous, and guaranteed to send someone to the emergency room. The animosity began in 1987 when both men were floating in that WWF mid-card purgatory. Koko had just started feuding with the Hart Foundation. And while Bret was all business, Neidhart had the subtle charm of a flying ashtray. According to an anonymous referee from the WWF in the kayfabe commentary's timeline, the WWF in 1987, Neidhart mocked Koko's high-flying moves backstage, calling them circus crap, and allegedly telling other wrestlers, "No one's afraid of a guy who looks like a breakdancing chicken." Koko didn't take it well. In a shoot interview, he recalled a heated locker room exchange where he told Neidhart, "If I'm a chicken, you're a pig with a beard, and I ain't never seen a pig win a match without help from a better partner." Cold, brutal, and reportedly delivered while tying his boots like a boss. Things came to a head on a European tour when Neidhart allegedly stiffed Koko in a tag match. According to former ring announcer Mike McGurk, Koko stormed backstage, kicked open the locker room door, and said, "If Jim tries that again, he better be wearing a helmet." From that point on, the tension between the two was so thick, even Gorilla Monsoon could have called it without missing a beat. In the world of professional wrestling, backstage altercations are not uncommon. However, few are as notorious as the 1989 incident between Koko B. Ware and WWE executive Jim Troy. This confrontation wasn't just a minor scuffle, it was a full-blown brawl that left a lasting impression on those involved and the company as a whole. The tension began during a European tour in Brussels, Belgium. Jim Troy, a former hockey player turned WWE executive, reportedly made disparaging remarks about professional wrestling, labeling it as fake and mocking the wrestler's toughness. He specifically targeted Koko B. Ware, belittling his size and questioning his legitimacy as a performer. According to Bruce Pritchard on the Something to Wrestle podcast, Troy's comments were laced with condescension, and he boasted about his own toughness from his hockey days. Koko, known for his vibrant persona and high-flying moves, didn't take kindly to Troy's insults. The situation escalated when Troy allegedly slapped Koko, prompting a physical altercation that spilled into the hotel lobby. Eyewitness accounts describe a chaotic scene, with furniture overturned and both men exchanging blows. Despite Troy's larger stature, Koko reportedly held his own, leaving Troy with visible injuries. The aftermath was swift. Vince McMahon, upon learning of the incident, sent both men home immediately. While Koko was initially fired, he was rehired shortly after Troy resigned from his position. The incident highlighted the underlying tensions between wrestlers and management, especially when respect and professionalism are compromised. This altercation serves as a testament to Koko B. Ware's resilience and unwillingness to tolerate disrespect, regardless of the source. It also underscores the importance of mutual respect in the wrestling industry, both inside and outside the ring. If Ric Flair was the Rolex-wearing, limousine-riding, kiss-stealing son of a gun, then Buddy Landell was the knockoff watch you bought off a guy named Cousin Jerry in a Kmart parking lot. And that's exactly how Koko B. Ware saw him. Back in the early 80s in Memphis wrestling, Koko B. Ware was building his reputation as a dependable, fiery babyface who could sell a beatdown and fire up a crowd like no one else. Meanwhile, Buddy Landell, self-styled as the Nature Boy, strutted onto the scene with bleached blonde hair, a flare-light robe, and enough arrogance to make even Lex Luger roll his eyes. But Buddy's attitude didn't stay confined to promos. It spilled over behind the curtain, too. According to several shoot interviews, including Koko's own interview, the tension between him and Landell wasn't just about ego, it was about disrespect and race. Koko revealed that Landell would routinely undermine black wrestlers, especially in tag matches and backstage banter, dismissing their talent and trying to assert a pecking order based on his seniority and Southern wrestling ties. "He thought he was the man," Koko once said. "But I knew his game, talk trash behind your back and play humble when Jerry Jarrett walked by." Things boiled over during a match when the two were involved in a six-man tag match. Buddy, reportedly unhappy with having to sell for Koko, went off-script mid-match. He began sandbagging moves, no-selling offense, and generally making Koko look like he was wrestling a piece of drywall in sparkly boots. Backstage, things escalated further. Landell, known for his wild temper and self-destructive behavior, which would eventually derail several of his career comebacks, confronted Koko. Shouting turned to shoving. According to referee Jerry Calhoun, punches were exchanged, and only a steel door and Jimmy Hart's piercing scream kept the brawl from getting worse. From that point on, the two avoided each other in the locker room like it was an episode of Jerry Springer. Koko flatly refused to work with Landell unless absolutely necessary. Their feud was personal, cultural, and professional, all rolled into one. And in true Memphis fashion, none of it ever made it to TV. Because unlike today's product, back then, the real fights were behind the curtain. Well, if wrestling were high school, Stan Lane would be the smug guy in the varsity jacket who looked like he should be charming, but somehow always made you want to drop kick him into a trophy case. To fans, he was half of the legendary Midnight Express. To Koko B. Ware, he was half as good as he thought he was. Koko's heat with Stan Lane went back to the Mid-South and Continental days, where the Midnight Express were getting heat like a sauna full of Southern sheriffs. Lane had the look, the tan, and the confidence of a man who thought Vaseline and charisma were the same thing. But to Koko, Lane was a glorified backup dancer who'd gotten too big for his boots. And according to multiple shoot interviews and comments made by Koko himself, the issue wasn't just jealousy over crowd reactions. Koko genuinely thought Lane was sloppy, particularly with punches and selling. On one occasion, during a tag match in the CWA, Koko reportedly told Norville Austin backstage, If that perm hits me stiff one more time, he'll be picking up his teeth with his tennis racket. What made things worse was that Lane leaned into the pretty boy gimmick hard. He'd walk into locker rooms like a cologne commercial had come to life and talk about tanning beds like they were sacred temples. Koko, who came up the hard way in the Memphis circuit, where even the referees had cauliflower ears, had zero patience for Lane's glamorized idea of what a wrestler should be. The final straw reportedly came during a 6-man tag where Lane no-sold Koko's finisher, claiming he didn't feel it hit clean. Koko, ever the professional until pushed, spent the next 5 minutes potatoing Lane like he was preparing Sunday dinner. Backstage, he yelled, "Now you feel that, don't you, baby doll?" Even years later, Koko would throw shade in interviews about wrestlers who looked like $1 million but couldn't sell a DDT if their rent depended on it. You don't need a Dakota ring to know who he meant. Stan Lane might have had the hair, but when it came to earning Koko's respect, he never made the cut. So there you have it. 5 men who managed to do the impossible, get on the bad side of Koko B, Ware. And we're not talking about backstage bickering or you stole my ring gear level spats. These were full-blown, deeply personal grudges that stretched across state lines, locker rooms, and decades. Koko B. Ware might have danced to the ring with a rainbow-colored parrot, but he wasn't afraid to throw hands backstage if he felt slighted, sidelined, or straight-up disrespected. Let's not forget the real punchline. Most of the guys he hated ended up with bigger pushes, shorter careers, and less respect when the dust settled. Koko may not have held a major title, but he outlasted plenty of his rivals in memory and fandom. No one's out there buying Steve Kieran action figures or writing tribute songs about Eddie Gilbert, but Koko? He's still the Birdman of wrestling, still a Hall of Famer, and still the guy who could probably powerbomb half the locker room while holding Frankie the Parrot in one hand. So next time you think wrestling is all fake, just remember, grudges like these are as real as a Ric Flair divorce. And if you're ever in the business yourself, maybe take a note from history. Don't mess with the guy who brings a bird to work, because chances are he's also carrying a grudge sharp enough to clip your wings. Thanks for watching.